You've been feeling a tightness in your chest that has no explanation, and that crying that's been coming to your eyes lately, without warning and without any obvious reason, wasn't sadness. It was recognition. Something inside you realized that the burden you carry isn't an ordinary weight. It's the weight of a choice that was already written before you were even born. What you've lived through wasn't a series of defeats. It was a process of separation for something far greater. I'm not here to offer you empty comfort. I'm here to show you what your spiritual eyes have finally begun to see. In this meeting, you're going to recognize the three fundamental marks that prove divine choice rests upon your life, even on the days when you felt most abandoned. You're finally going to understand why your path has been so much steeper than the paths of those around you. And above all, I'm going to reveal to you the exact reason why the burden you carry has been so heavy, turning your exhaustion into a clear understanding of purpose. This is your contract of clarity. You've already noticed that things don't click the way they used to. You've been having these moments of sudden crying, a soul cleansing that seems to come from a place you can't reach. You feel forcibly isolated, as if the old circles of conversation have become places where you can't breathe anymore, because the frequency of your spirit has changed. You live in a constant sense of displacement, as if you're living in a world that isn't yours, occupying a space that is only a waiting room for something that hasn't yet been fully revealed. These signs are not symptoms of a problem. They are evidence that you are being prepared. The crying is your soul aligning itself. The isolation is the protection of your destiny. The feeling of not belonging is the confirmation that you have been called to lead a path that no one has opened yet. Take a deep breath now. Let that recognition sink into the center of your being, where truth lives and doesn't need words to be felt. If at least one of these signs touched you, if your shoulders dropped at any point in the last few minutes as if a weight had been momentarily lifted, type the number 888 in the comments, your fingers typing those numbers. Attention! You need to prepare yourself now. I have prepared material for those who doubt their own calling from God and still do not have confirmation. Are you one of the chosen? We'll give you that clarity. These are the 7 signs of the language of the calling, marks of God in the story of every chosen one, so you can reread your story and recognize the purpose sealed over you before the foundation of the world. Stop calling coincidence what is actually a calling. Stop silencing the sacred restlessness. Stop postponing the answer you feel. Your window is closing, and a chosen one who does not recognize the calling does not walk in purpose. More than 10,000 people have already read the 7 signs and received the conviction they had been seeking for years. They were just like you. They felt something no one understood. They lived in silent doubt, and they discovered it was real. And it had a name. The offer is open only this month. Access the link in the pinned comment now, before doubt steals another year from your calling. Typing those numbers are your spirit saying yes to this calling. It's the smallest agreement, but it's the mark of your commitment to the truth that is now beginning to unfold. Type 888 and come back here to me. That number is the frequency of overflow, the signal that what was contained within you is ready to flood your reality with a new authority. You've marked your place. Now we can go down to the deepest layer where the diagnosis of your tiredness becomes the key to your liberation. Because while you were trying to be strong, what you were actually doing was holding up structures that had already been deactivated by heaven so that you could finally build what is eternal. You've marked your place, and by typing that number, you've initiated a calibration that is not done by human hands. The 888 you just registered is the frequency of divine overflow, the sign that your previous measure has been broken so that what was dammed up, what you stored up during years of waiting, can finally begin to flow outward. It is the mark of the chosen one who understands that abundance is not something to be sought, but something you allow to overflow when the soul stops trying to contain what isn't yours. But understand, your tiredness wasn't born from a lack of faith, and certainly not from a weakness of character. Your exhaustion, which you feel right now as a weight on your shoulders and a fog in your mind, has a very precise cause. You tried to sustain, with every fiber of your being, structures that had already been deactivated by heaven. You became the pillar of a house whose beams no longer had any purpose of support. You spent your years taking care of relationships, projects, and postures that, in truth, had already fulfilled their role in a past season. You operated in survival mode, believing that if you stopped pushing, everything would collapse. But the truth that is now beginning to emerge is that when you let go of those ropes, you aren't causing a fall. You are allowing the beginning of the construction of what is eternal. Imagine now with me a large inner courtyard. For a long time, you believed this courtyard was just an empty space, a waiting area where the wind blew dust and silence was your only company. You walked through that courtyard many times, feeling that life was happening out there, in the lit halls where people celebrated and moved around. But what you didn't realize, and what the recent crying revealed, is that this inner courtyard was exactly where you were prepared. While the world outside was busy with noise, you were being worked on in the silence of your own center. The courtyard was not a place of waiting, it was a place of foundation. The walls you felt as walls of isolation were, in truth, raised to protect the soil where the seeds of your purpose are beginning to sprout. Every tear that fell in that courtyard, every moment you felt alone in the middle of a crowd, was a silent irrigation for what now needs to bloom. You weren't being forgotten. You were being hidden to be preserved. If this revelation about the inner courtyard made something inside you click, if the image of that space that always seemed empty now finally made sense as your place of secret preparation, type the words I see in the comments. Let that recognition seal the place where truth just landed. The act of typing those words is not about me. It's about you taking possession of what has always been available to you, but what you couldn't name. It's your way of telling heaven that you've stopped fighting the silence and started to understand the language of preparation. Type I see and come back here to me, because what comes next is the understanding that your return home no longer requires any effort. Only the act of opening the hands that have been closed for so long, clenched around a past that no longer serves you. The solution you've been searching for is not found in another workload or a new survival strategy, but in the simple act of letting go of the burden that is no longer yours. For years, you tried to carry the world on your back, believing that your importance depended on the weight you could bear. But the truth is that this constant effort was only an attempt to fill a void that can only be occupied by the certainty of your choice. You don't need to earn what has already been given to you. You don't need to build a bridge to reach where your spirit already dwells. The path is about unlearning, about softening the tensions you accumulated in the attempt to be accepted by those who never knew how to see your essence. Receive this identity of the chosen one as you receive the morning light without doing anything except opening the windows. Take a deep breath with me now. Let this idea that you no longer need to explain yourself to the world settle into the deepest part of you. If something in this message confirmed what your spirit already knew, let your like be your amen without words. Not as a social media metric, but as a deep agreement that what was named here was named correctly, recognizing that truth doesn't need applause, only witnesses. As you feel this relief, there is someone in your life who needs exactly this message right now. Think of that person who has been striving more than everyone around them, and yet still sees the doors remain closed, as if there's an invisible glass blocking their progress. Think of that person who has been walking in silence in a way no one around them can understand. Someone whose soul is exhausted from looking for answers in empty places. That person's face just came to your mind while I was speaking. It wasn't by accident. Send this to them, not as a content recommendation, but as a delivery of an urgent message. Just as the message reached you, it needs to overflow to someone else who is also waiting for the confirmation that the journey, though hard, always had a greater purpose. Before we move on to the final seal of this conversation, type the words, "I am the chosen one," in the comments. Don't type it as a wish or a distant hope. Type it as a solemn confirmation. The agreement that has been forming in silence between heaven and your listening is an agreement you will live from for the rest of this season. Type it slowly, with the conviction of someone who finally recognizes their own name. Let your fingers do what your spirit is already doing at this very moment, signing underneath this revelation that transforms tiredness into new strength. What you write now is the definitive mark of your acceptance, the moment when doubt loses its authority and your identity establishes itself on a plane that can no longer be shaken by any external voice. Stay alert, because when your identity is recognized, everything around you begins to reorganize itself to serve this new state of being. The truth about your recent crying is deeper than the surface of your eyes can reach, because it was not a cry of anguish, but the sound of a protective layer finally tearing open so that your essence could breathe. The tiredness you feel, the one that accumulates even after a night's rest, is the physical mark of a spiritual transition where your old self had to empty out to make room for what is about to arrive. You weren't just trying to survive a difficult period. You were being calibrated for a frequency that most people around you simply cannot tune into. And that is exactly why, at times, you felt like a stranger in your own story, walking through hallways where conversations seemed devoid of meaning and where your values found no echo. In this conversation we're having now, what I propose is not a change in what you do, but a revelation about who you are. By the end of this delivery, you will recognize the subtle signs that have been punctuating your days as coordinates of a map that only you can read. You will understand why the door you tried so hard to open remained locked, and you will discover that the delay was not a denial, but a necessary time of preparation. And above all, there is a seal, a final word that I will deliver directly over your journey, and that I believe is the real reason you stopped what you were doing to listen to this message at this very moment. There are signs that don't lie, and you have been seeing them with a frequency that is almost unsettling. Maybe you've noticed waves of emotion rising in your chest for no apparent reason, as if a memory that isn't yours were trying to surface. Maybe you've noticed how long-time friendships or even family relationships have started to require exhausting effort, as if you were speaking a language no one else understands. Or maybe, and this happens to many who are on the path of choice, you have been waking up at constant hours during the night, feeling that, even though the house was silent, something was talking to your spirit. The 888 is the frequency of overflow, the mathematical sign that what was contained within you is ready to overflow, and by putting that on the digital paper, you officialize your openness to this new cycle. Type 888. And come back here to me, because what we have ahead is the diagnosis of why this weight has been so present. The pattern you've operated up until now is a survival mechanism you adopted at an age when your voice was still ignored. You spent years pulling ropes that weren't attached to anything, trying to keep order in systems that were already destined for collapse, confusing your personal loyalty with the obligation to fix what wasn't your responsibility. You perform for an audience that was never watching, exhausting yourself to deliver a performance no one asked for. But consider the metaphor of the inner courtyard. Imagine that your soul is an old house with a garden you forgot you had. For a long time, you focused on painting the outside walls and fixing the front gate, while inside, your courtyard of light was being watered in silence, growing deep roots you didn't see, but which now support a structure you didn't even know you were capable of raising. If something inside you just sealed itself, if the image of that inner courtyard touched a deep place you can't explain, type the words I see in the comments. Let the recognition seal where it just landed, because the act of typing those words makes the witness permanent in your own record of awakening. Type it and come back here to me, because the solution now presents itself without effort. The solution to your exhaustion is not more effort, it is unlearning. It is allowing yourself to let go of the rope you held for so long and realizing that when you let it go, the world doesn't collapse. It finally aligns. You don't need to earn the choice that has already been made over your life. You only need to stop fighting the current that is pushing you toward the place where you have always belonged. Not as a metric, but as a silent agreement that what was named here was named correctly. There is someone in your life who needs exactly this message right now, someone who lives in a heavy silence and who, without knowing it, is waiting for a sign that they haven't lost their sanity, only changed frequency. Someone whose face just appeared in your mind while I was speaking, someone who is seen as strong by everyone, but who inside is exhausted from holding up a world that no longer serves them. Send this to that person, not as a recommendation, but as a delivery of care. Before we finish, type the words "I am the chosen one" in the comments, not as a wish, but as a final confirmation of the agreement that formed between heaven and your listening, a definitive seal of who you are and where you will walk from now on. Type it slowly, letting your fingers do what your spirit is already doing. You feel the weight of this recognition now, don't you? That crying that escaped without warning, maybe in the silence of your room or while you were driving, was not a sign of weakness or a deep sadness you can't explain. On the contrary, it was proof that your sensitivity has finally reached the boiling point where resistance meets surrender. You have been feeling displaced, looking at the people around you as if you were watching a play where everyone forgot the script except you. And your anguish, that tiredness that no physical rest can cure, comes precisely from trying to keep the scene going, from trying to fill a role that no longer fits your new spiritual stature. You've been waking up at strange hours, as if there were a conversation happening in another plane, and you were the only one who can catch the frequency. You feel as if you are living in two worlds, one that demands your productivity, and another that calls for your presence. It's the smallest agreement, but it's real. The number 888 is the frequency of overflow, the moment when the scarcity of meaning converts into abundance of purpose, signaling that your harvest began before you even prepared the soil. The pattern you've been repeating is that of someone who carries the world on their back because they believe that if they let go, everything collapses. But what you haven't realized is that this burden is an obsolete gear. You have been striving to sustain connections, jobs, and expectations that have already completed their cycle in your trajectory. You confuse loyalty with persistence. Your soul is asking for a rest that is not lying down, it is emptying out. Imagine that your interior is an ancient courtyard built by hands that were not yours. For a long time, you cleaned that floor, painted the walls, and tried to renovate what, in truth, needed to be demolished so that light could enter. You never saw that courtyard as a place of foundation, but as an obligation of maintenance. And that is why you feel so exhausted. You are protecting a castle that was built on sand, while what you really came here to do requires solid ground. Let the recognition seal where it just landed. The act of typing those words makes the witness permanent in your own record. Type it and come back here to me. You have been feeling an emptiness that is not of absence, but of waiting, as if your days were being counted by a clock that only you hear. Your journey has been marked by a succession of departures, not only of people, but of old versions of yourself that no longer fit into your current skin. The crying that came without warning, often in the silence of the early morning, was not a manifestation of sadness or defeat. It was, in truth, your essence recognizing that the time for pretending conformity is over. When you felt out of place in places that once felt familiar, you were not losing yourself. You were being removed from a frequency that no longer sustains your truth. That sense of strangeness is the sign that your vision has been expanded. The number 888 represents the overflow, the abundance that begins to flow when you stop trying to control the ebb and allow the tide to take you. To understand the depth of what is happening now, we need to look at your inner courtyard. Imagine that your life, for years, was like a piece of land surrounded by high walls, built not by you, but by circumstances that required you to hide in order to survive. You took care of that courtyard with diligence, planting seeds that never bloomed because the soil wasn't yours. But at this very moment, the walls are falling. The revelation that you were chosen is not a medal to be displayed. It is the crumbling of the walls that prevented you from seeing the vast horizon that was always there. If the image of that inner courtyard, now open and illuminated, brought a clarity you can't explain, type the words "I see" in the comments. Let the recognition seal this moment where truth just landed. You no longer need to strive to be accepted or validated by those who don't know the depth of your roots. The solution is not in doing more, in searching for new formulas, or in wearing yourself out trying to fix what was only a phase of preparation. The secret is unlearning. It is letting go of the tools you used to build defenses and simply allowing the light to enter. When you stop fighting, you finally understand that your divine choice does not depend on your performance, but on your readiness to be who you truly are. The tiredness you felt was the symptom of a soul that tried to live on a frequency far below the one it was designed for. Now the silence is no longer one of emptiness, but of fullness. You are committed, you are sent, you are being led. Your walk, which once seemed like a labyrinth, is beginning to reveal itself as a straight line drawn by hands that know the final destination. What you went through, the nights of crying and the forced isolation, were only the calibration of your spirit for this moment of absolute clarity. Right now, all over the world, other people are receiving this same recognition, feeling the deep relief of knowing that the waiting has finally found its purpose. You are part of a silent movement, an invisible network of hearts that, like yours, are being awakened to the reality that they do not walk alone. It is a connection that does not announce itself with noise, and that is exactly why it is unshakable and real. Attention! You need to prepare yourself now. I have prepared material for those who doubt their own calling from God and still do not have confirmation. Are you one of the chosen? We'll give you that clarity. These are the 7 signs of the language of the calling, marks of God in the story of every chosen one, so you can reread your story and recognize the purpose sealed over you before the foundation of the world. Stop calling coincidence what is actually a calling. Stop silencing the sacred restlessness. Stop postponing the answer you feel. Your window is closing, and a chosen one who does not recognize the calling does not walk in purpose. More than 10,000 people have already read the 7 signs and received the conviction they had been seeking for years. They were just like you. They felt something no one understood. They lived in silent doubt, and they discovered it was real. And it had a name. The offer is open only this month. Access the link in the pinned comment now before doubt steals another year from your calling.